Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Between Monsters and Men. Today we are walking the steps into Reincarnation, the Anne Frank story. Before getting into this story, I would like to add, please be respectful of the dead and those who have passed. This story is particularly touching to my heart, for one of my own ancestors had gone through the horrors of the Holocaust and the concentration camps. Now please enjoy. Anne Frank was a German-born diarist. She gained fame following the publication of The Diary of a Young Girl, at which she had documented her life in hiding from 1942 to 1944 during World War II. While at the concentration camp Bergen-Belsen, she died. It was the year 1945 and she was just 15. She passed away from possibly contracting typhus, but no one really knows. Less than 10 years later, in 1954, a girl was born into a Christian family who lived in Sweden. Her name was Barbro Karlen, but this little girl knew she wasn't who everyone said she was. When she was less than 3 years old, she told her parents that her name was not Barbro at all, but Anne Frank. At the time, The Diary of a Young Girl had not made it to Sweden yet, and not hit its popularity, and Anne Frank was not a household name. During this time period, her parents grew more concerned, as they would try to get her to call them Ma and Pa. But Barbro felt that they weren't her real parents, and even told her mother that her real father would come for her and take her home. Throughout her younger childhood years, she tried to tell her parents about the details of her life as Anne, but they thought they were merely fantasies of a child. She didn't just have memories though, she had terrible nightmares filled with men running upstairs with dogs and kicking open a door to where her family was hiding. Eventually, her parents got so concerned of these nightmares and tales of another life that they sent Barbro to a psychiatrist to be evaluated, but by then, Barbro saw that whenever she talked about her past memories, people got tense, so she made no mention of her other life when she saw the psychiatrist, and she got off with a clean slate and a bit of good health. At the age of 7 to 8, for the first time in her life, her school teacher talks about Anne Frank in class. Severely confused, Barbro didn't understand why her teacher was talking about her, and how she knew some aspects of her life that she had never relayed to the teacher at any point. Growing up with these memories and nightmares, followed with the abnormal sense of aversion, Barbro grew intense dislikes and even a fear of things that would normally not bother someone unless traumatized. She refused to eat beans, which the Frank family lived on for nearly 2 years. She never took showers, only baths. While in the concentration camps, Nazis would bring prisoners into large rooms promising showers and instead gassing them. She had an extreme fear of men in uniforms and horses, getting anxiety when any of them were near, to the point of almost running away. But later in life, she dared this fear by overcoming it when she became a mounted Swedish police officer. She would say, "I can show myself there is nothing to fear if I am the one in the uniform." At the age of 10, Barbro was finally able to prove to her parents that she was indeed Anne Frank, when her family took a tour of the major cities of Europe and when they arrived in Amsterdam. Without directions, Barbara was able to direct her parents down the streets and alleyways straight to the building that once hid and harbored the Frank family during World War II. By now, the family had heard about Anne Frank and was planning on making a trip to the Anne Frank Museum, which is where Barbara led them. But when Barbara found the building, it had already been changed to accommodate the museum, which she was able to pick up on immediately, such as the front steps, which were changed. They entered the house and went up the stairs to the attic, and as they did, Barbara began to go white, breaking out in a cold sweat and even reaching for her mother's hand. Her mother became frightened when her little girl's hand wrapped around hers, for Barbara's was ice cold. It got worse when they entered the attic. Barbara became overwhelmed with irrational terrors, all of which she experienced in her nightmares. She found it hard to breathe, and panic spread through her. As they went from one room to Anne, she suddenly stood still and brightened up a little. She looked over the wall of one side and said, "Look, the pictures of the film stars are still there." On Anne Frank's side of the room, she had taken clippings of movie stars and affixed them to the wall. Though Barbara saw them sitting in place where they had been originally, they were no longer there. Her mother asked her, "What pictures? The wall is bare." And when Barbara looked again, the wall indeed had no pictures. But this surprised her mother so much that she felt the need to ask one of the guides about these pictures her daughter brought up. The guide told her that they had taken down the pictures temporarily so they could be mounted under glass, so they would no longer be destroyed or stolen. Barbara's mother was full of questions and irritated on the entire matter, but the 10-year-old couldn't even give her the answer she wanted. She felt the need to get out of there. Her legs felt like jelly as she suddenly raced down the stairs, and on the final step, with tears running down her face, her legs folded beneath her and she fell. Due to the events that occurred in Amsterdam, her parents finally came to terms that her daughter is the reincarnation of Anne Frank. After all, who could deny the evidence? in a city so easily that anyone can get lost in. How could a 10-year-old girl find her way to Anne Frank's museum without a problem? How could she know exactly where the pictures were on the exact wall that they were placed on? How did she know of Anne Frank when she was only 3 and even her parents haven't heard of her? After the trip, Barbro's mother became very spiritual, a definite believer in reincarnation. However, her father, a deeply Christian man and a believer of the Christian worldview, found it a little bit hard and even annoying. I can't deny that you have somehow been here before. Perhaps you have lived before and have reincarnated, but you are the only one, he exclaimed to her. At least at that point she could finally talk to her mother about her past life as Anne Frank, and had her mother's full support. Much like Anne Frank, Barbro was a childhood writing prodigy. When she was a child, and at the time she felt uncomfortable about speaking about her past life, she wrote and wrote often. One day, when she was 11, a family friend read a few of her works and realized that this girl had talent. She was asked if some of her work could be sent to a publisher, and at the age of 12, her very first book was published. The book, Man on Earth, became the best-selling poetry book in Swedish history. Later in her teen years, she had a total of 9 books published and would debate theology with ministers and theologians on television shows. After her book, And the Wolves Howled, came out, she got a great deal of attention and publicity in Europe and soon earned the attention of Buddy Elias, who was the president of the Anne Frank Foundation and last living relative of Anne Frank. Buddy arranged a meeting with Barbro through her publisher and told her that he was only a fan, and that he had no relations to Anne or Anne Frank Foundation. Before he met Barbro, he didn't believe in reincarnation and wanted to know this person who claimed to be the reincarnation of someone who he was so close to. When they met, it was 1995. Barbro relates that when they first saw each other, they both fell into each other's arms and cried together. They spoke for a couple of hours during the first meeting and had stayed friends till the day that Buddy passed away in 2015. Occasionally, Barbro would stay at Buddy's home in Switzerland when she visited Europe, and Buddy would stay at Barbro's home whenever he visited her. He also truly believed in reincarnation after having met her. There is no real scientific proof of reincarnation, but about half of the world believes in it. From religious to realistic, we always ponder, is it possible for any one of us to have a past life? There are hundreds of people who had made claims that they were the reincarnation of Anne Frank. For whatever reasons, no one is entirely sure. Though she was beautiful, young, and a girl with a large heart and even bigger talent, she suffered through one of the cruelest acts of mankind has caused on themselves. What benefit would you gain other than a little bit of fame and even more skepticism and criticism? In Barbro's case, she started having these memories and nightmares at such a young age that it was nearly impossible for her to come up with wild and eccentric stories as she did. When she was having these memories, Anne Frank wasn't heard of in Sweden, so the television, radio, and even her parents couldn't be relied on for information. So where did it all come from, if not from inside her own head? The greatest proof we have from her is the fact that she did lead her parents through the busy and confusing streets of Amsterdam without so much as a pause to read signs or ask for directions. She had no problem relaying information on the secret annex, which was the attic that held the Frank family and the items inside. This was also before the internet, when the information on the pictures and on the original building could have possibly been fed to the public. So do we truly have our greatest teen author back in our lives? Will she inspire us as she had for her family during their darkest days? Afraid not. Though Barbro writes just as phenomenally as Anne, her memories of her past life came to an abrupt halt at the age of 15, the age that Anne Frank herself died at. Why did they stop? It is simple as her past life had ended, and so her memories of it did too. Barbro did continue having nightmares, even ones that opened up secrets to Anne's life that helped Barbro through troubled times during her own dark period of her life. And with only one small clip of Anne, our only way of seeing her love and passion is through the eyes of Barbro. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed researching it. I read Anne Frank's diary a couple of times back in school and rewatched some of the movies to get fully inspired for this video. Now tell me, do you believe that Barbro harbors the talented soul of Anne Frank? For more dark and mysterious, please like, comment, and subscribe.